Test, test, test. Test. I hope, I hope everyone can hear me now. I had some problems with the other one, but you're able to join me. That's great. Okay, great. Some of you found your way here. Good. I had a much more elaborate idea for all of this, but it didn't work out. But that's okay. Make this work. I'm just gonna give just a minute or two more for everyone to show up. Yeah, just a minute or two more for everyone to show up. Test. Test. Okay. Greetings. Thank you for showing up. Um, Everybody, do me a favor. Tell me how well you can hear my voice right now. There's a bit of a latency, so I'm talking a bit strangely, but just write in the chat if you can hear me clearly, and we'll go ahead and get started. Perfect. Thank you, Adrian. Okay, so I would like to very much thank you. It's my shirt I wear at home. I'm here in my home. I wasn't actually even going to um, be on camera, but my original design for this whole thing didn't exactly work out, but that's okay. I'm glad everybody's here. I'm glad you made it here. Um, and those of you who have followed me, you know who I am. You probably have some idea about this. Again, with the other design, the other plan for this whole thing, there was going to be music, but there won't be. But that's okay. Um, you know what? It might have even been a little bit distracting. It was an experiment, but it's okay. We'll do this a different way. And I'm just going to read. Um, so it is my first book that I've completed. It is the first book in the trilogy of the Sainthood. The whole trilogy is called The Sainthood. Um, I'll tell more about the book. I'll do a short sort of discussion, and maybe you can take a couple questions after if you want. Um, but just thank you for coming. Um, I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm going to jump around a little bit. The book is actually 15 chapters. It's just under 400 pages, the first book. But I'm going to start from the beginning of the book, and I'm going to jump around to a few sections that I feel merit particular attention in regards to like getting a real sense of the story and a sense of how I write. Everything else you can put together later if you choose to buy the book. Okay, so let's begin. Memory shapes that which we have come to believe, both about our life and about ourselves. From memory, we've constructed the neural pathways that, like footprints, trace the routes we have taken from where we were to where we are, from who we were to who we became. Most days, I'd rather not remember anything. I know these sprawling streets, and they seem to know me as well, and yet, still, I couldn't say how I came to walk them or where they end. It rains on them now, and it feels like it has never stopped raining from the familiar gray clouds, sickly lit by the dim neon haze of the luxury hotels and nightclubs of the Sentiment District. They're yet far, but I can see the intermittent flashing of their endless revelry into the night. From down here, I can't imagine what that's like. Such a decadence of this supposed higher order, higher social class, which feels mythological, obnoxious. And yet beneath their facade, I feel an emptiness, perhaps even deeper than my own. I sense their desperation, an existential dread, the same mundane fate that awaits us all. So they must party until the party can go on no more. Mindlessly rejoicing until bleak death cuts the power on their raucous, licentious celebration. I sense that there, but I sense that in all of us down here too. I listen to these streets, and in the night I hear them say, "Welcome back, one of our own, to the neon dark." And then as the dismal grayness of the day enumbrates to dusk, I hear the loud urgency of tasks undone, silenced, to the disquieted lullaby of aimless driving, window shopping for illicit fancies, an echoing distant disco of ineloquent indulgences. looking to the sky to cash my own idle wish. I can't find my wishing star. Just the beaming neon signs and LCD screens advertising my cheap wishes granted or my money back guaranteed. Maybe somehow we have at our reckless disposal everything we want, despite having nothing we need. Desire gave us our dreams, it gave us our requiems. Passion was the exertion commanded by our persevering the odds against what we wanted. Some wanted glory and power, the demonic immortality of fame and status that can be bought for the ultimate bounty of human suffering. Some only wanted to be left alone to their vices, to face the character of their destroyer in melancholy solitude. Some only want to reconcile with their destroyer because they believed it would show them a friendly face at the end. For most, that belief was always wrong, and for a fortunate few, fate arrived, cloaked in the night and in a mask, and that was the best they could afford for the credits of a normal man. You see, credits are the coin of this realm, harsh in their persistent indifference to individual circumstances. It was currency after currency died in the tribulation, doing away with messy paper transactions and the fool's worth of precious stones and alloys. These things still carried value, though, but it was a subjective value it acquired in the accruity of circumstances. It was the elite who threw them around with abandon, practically painting the walls with the residue of their abhorrent wealth. Everyday necessities were things of stake to us below, but it was excess that defined normality for the gluttonous princes and princesses of Babylon. They occupied the nicer areas and filled these places with gaudy monuments to themselves and consumed the very emptiness which was our last possession. If there was limited oxygen, they breathed it first. If there was a famine, occupants of lower classes could be cannibalized to perpetuate their decadent existence. Expense itself was the greatest flex of opulence, when even people could be bought and sold, if for nothing more than to furnish the gaudy neglect of their morally destitute dwellings with purchased displays of indecency and perversion. Meanwhile, street police endeavored in vain or charade to dismantle underworld crime, a scene rife with this very form of human trafficking. All police, though, were merely operations laid into place by the elites themselves, an open secret sheltered by our denial all the same. And then we arrive in the dead-end street of the inevitable truth of its actual connection. Fables of outer world cults abducting people to force indoctrinate, or terrorist cells hidden in plain sight, radicalizing anyone susceptible to their subliminal brainwashing. Even if some of that is true, the recurring answer is frighteningly obvious. Maybe they too looked up to find their wishing star, but only saw those LCD eyes looking back at them and assigning their existence a monetary destiny. God lived in the penthouses. That's what these streets have told me. I used my credits to sustain my life, whatever that may entail. But if the circumstances are favorable, I may visit the cinema, the End Town Cinema, my modest and wholesome refuge from the constant drag of conscious thought. A few of the cinemas are just descended from libertarians of printed word, and as such they inherited clandestine caches of lost films from an age when men still held cameras, when productions required things like costumes and makeup artists, when actors themselves memorized lines to deliver on screen. The relics these are from a world of days gone by, of things so strange as to defy belief. But I keep coming back to see more, to fuel my dreams with longing and respite. I'm reminded, perhaps even suggested to dream, as those libertarians and directors did. I admired them and these surviving havens of aspiration that survive the passage of time. I reminisce about unknown dwellings made of wood and stone instead of steel and concrete and wire. Creatures of the planet that move in the sky and on the ground and in the oceans instead of confinement to screens in pay-per-view terminals for jaded tourists. If I had children of my own, I'd want to raise them in the tradition of these times now gone. Something in them feels pure and natural, even human. Technology gave us wings on which, like Icarus, we soared high. And like Icarus, a part of us was destroyed by the sun, but not with fire. Rather, the sun was a black hole, and our earthly aspirations were utterly devoured by the profound emptiness therein. See, memory can be stored, but it seems that it can also be erased. And when you erase those pathways, it's almost impossible to find your way back. Somewhere along the forbidden path paved with circuitry and hubris, the advent of AI, we achieved the very quantization of our dreams. We no longer knew who or what we were. The elites silenced their hearts and dreams with the numbness that only immense affluence could buy. The aeonic distance between humanity and money. Yet in these old movies, the elites were always eventually humanized to be classless, pathetic idiots in disguise. Here, no disguise was required. Reprehensible excess was the garment of the foolish regalia, the pantomimes of the corrupt bourgeoisie. It's no wonder that they've engineered stark separation of classes in this society. We are governed by their avatars, an ageless tale in itself, as their own affairs transcend the basic necessities of those of us on the street. Perhaps more telling is the fact that none of us here can exactly describe their municipal buildings, their courthouses, their offices of administration, save for the vaguest constructions of rumor based on the logic that such places should exist, regardless if they actually do. Theirs are the aims of so-called nobility by men of fortune, who have built their monuments to stand the test of centuries, for future generations to marvel mystified at the marble hem of their gowns, to live out their days, to maintain the illusion of its significance. It's always joked that if one of them was banished to live among us down here, it would be damnation for them, because this, to them, is hell. That was from chapter 1. I'll read an excerpt now from chapter 2. Chapter 2. The rain touches every place equally. Best laid plans of princes and vagrants ruined in the cleansing judgment of an inconvenient rainfall. The rain washes away the abuses of the day. The rain fills every open grave. Matters of men to it are immaterial. It's a thing that always has been, no matter what fresh hell with which we endeavor to scorch the world undone. The rain has seemed at times to fall hardest over me because I have lived dirty. It was the necessary accumulation of filth which gave great men their shade. And yet the rain has never lied to me. The rain has always fallen in my shadow. Mr. Warner, Donovan says, briskly entering my office. They're ready for you now, sir. After a pause, I tell him, yes, let them know. I do not break my gaze, though. I face the window to savor this view, a multi-quadrillion credit view, only until I am ready to go, not when these people call for me. He's coming in, Donovan announces, his index finger pressed against his earpiece. My velour curtains reach from the ceiling to the floor, and they're changed every 6 days. I invented a job for a common man specifically for this purpose, which feeds his children and pays the entirety of their college tuition. Charitable of me, really, but I can afford it laughably. Sir? Donovan re-enters to nudge me. He really should know better. I say nothing. I can hear Donovan swallow hard, realizing his error. And then he humbly retreats to join the other security personnel. Men of higher importance have been terminated by me for much less, but my focus is needed elsewhere. The Terra intra-network conferences were my least favorite social charade, and they were usually only called for when a judgment needs to be delivered with urgency. As CEO, I have overseen the broadcast of all major journalistic projects, and they've never failed. The board members will pass my selections across a panel of my peers to determine if I have abused my power, manipulated facts, or unnecessarily disparaged rival media outlets. The notion of it as unnecessary was hilarious to me. I have most definitely, time and time again, committed all of these infractions and then some. And I did so with absolute cognizance. My decisions are not subject to the approval of a board or a panel or whichever whimsical epithets they invent for these silly made-up jobs. My career is bulletproof, and all of these individuals, including both curtain hangers and quality assurance specialists alike, are permitted exactly those silly made-up jobs only because I willed it to be so. Ever charitable I am. I am escorted down the corridors of the 18th floor by my security team, as it is fairly common that my absolute decisions are not absolutely accepted by society, that my passion for truth would rather see dilution from members of the inferior press and law enforcement. People never understand my vision. And this is fine, as I require that they only recognize the necessity of it and stay out of my way. Donovan and Haynes, my close security, open the double doors to the restricted conference hall and signal Powell and Janice, long distance security, to begin their patrols outside the building. And so now I enter. At the round table, we sit in a large circle in high-backed chairs under low ambient lighting. I selected this layout because darkness facilitates ease of honesty. I have color-coordinated suits to match the hue of the room. Today is mauve. The TIN conference room is a piece of architectural mastery, designed by my father when I expressed my interest in forming my own entertainment enterprise to herald my ascension into the highest seat of our lineage. The place where ordinances are made and executed, we thought, should be consistent with the prestige in which they are delivered. The room itself is seated above an underground chasm made after the emptying of a tribulation-era mass grave. A wide pedestal was embedded at the chasm floor, and atop was installed a wide platform which connected to the entry via a footbridge. Panels on the walls open to screens or projectors for holographic interfacing if necessary, with our primary holographic interface built into the center of the round marble table. "Glad you can join us, Warner," Mr. Leary told me curtly, as though he wanted me to fire him right here and now. Acrimoniously, I've preserved Mr. Leary in his position with my father, Francis Warner Sr.'s old guard. He is old, and he will die soon. In my infinite mercy, I've spared him the harsh truth of his irrelevance by bestowing the illusion of purpose upon him. His mind is weak, his sight is short, and he serves no other purpose than to remind the others of the futility of their involvement in the empire. The others were expendable, vague beings dressed in laughably expensive suits that will one day be pawned for someone's grocery money. As a younger man, a man in his early 20s, my viciousness of industry was already ravenous and salivating to clean house. But in father's last years, he dutifully requested that they remain. Like a coward, he traded the dignity of a man's death in his bed among his family for the pathetic and degenerate end as an addict, taking shot after shot from the nursing staff hired to clean his excrement, administer his intravenous filth, and keep him hidden from our staff and the general public. The media was, of course, provided with a melodramatic lamentation of his normal life, his noble life, which, unbeknownst to them, was in reality a paradigm of monstrous perversion and treachery. The latter of those turned out to be the most instrumental of qualities he granted me in my, shall we say, unorthodox upbringing. "So," I said, as I looked around at these aging buffoons in suits I paid for, and I asked with a clear sheen of contempt to my voice, folding my hands, "What brings us here today?" "Those kids in the tunnels. You calling them terrorists has incited a panic," Mr. Leary begins. He says, "Public outrage." "Well, send a crew," I told him simply. "Let's take this as an opportunity to hold on to the momentum of the ratings." The board members sighed after I said that, exchanging disgusted looks, some of them closing their little folders of meaningful chicken scratch in disbelief. "Threats have been issued against the studio, Warner, against our lives, your life." I stared blankly away, trying somewhat not to crack a smile. A militaristic suited gentleman, Mr. Lee, with matching white hair and mustache, leans in and says, "This is different." "No, it isn't," I said. "Mr. Warner," he continued, "we have already lost correspondence on the street." He, in dramatic fashion, slides over a dossier across the table to me, which I do not open. "Look at the files," he implores me. I still do not open them. Instead, I recline. I seem to stifle a yawn and then come back. "Gentlemen, if they've received sincere threats, they would be smart to go into hiding. We don't need to make any rash decisions on their behalf. Shall we adjourn?" Miles Erickson, a younger representative, speaks up and says, "Mr. Warner, you'll forgive us if we don't share your optimism." How droll. They were all poised, coiled like snakes, glaring in my direction. It clicks that this isn't the entire story, and I'm becoming impatient. I tell them, "You've clearly all discussed this already." I say, "Let me be clear about one thing. You, all of you, are employees. You sit at my table because of this beautiful illusion of power that I gave to you. Know your role and let that sink in for a moment before you waste any more of my time. Now, what are you not telling me? So, that was a bit of chapter 2. I'm going to skip right ahead to chapter 5. And I will provide a little bit of context for all of this um, once I'm finished reading. I was laid on my side in another dank cell, staring at the cracked bricked wall, scratched by the nails of desperate, terrified men before me. The smell of blood and decrepitude is palpable, inescapable. Sometimes I hear shudders and faint sobs from the other cells, stifled miseries of men threatened with torture if they should cry out. Beyond the walls, sparse bullet gunfire, pulse weapons blasting, explosions too from time to time, maniacal shouting, laughter, profanity. Neither war nor peace, merely the random unrest of a mundane hell on earth. Or so it was for them. For me, I didn't suffer the burden of civilian panic nor the wanton criminality of outerland fugitives. Nor was I a guest to their unfamiliarity with strife and pain. Their deaths were a lullaby to me, one of the dearest I had ever known. This cell, any jail, any prison, they were my regularity. I had been here before, and I knew I would be here again. Is hell really a punishment of its home? Sometimes I thought I overheard whispered prayers and feverish quiet begging echoing out into the nothingness of the desert sprawl, hanging just barely above a whisper, but yet emphatic and tormented, forsaken by their deities. All so regular. The hours lost matter only to those who haven't made peace with this life, so they feel constant fear that anything of the world is passing them by, that they'll age and never know wonders and love and all other sorts of bullshit. Time died for me before I could count its moments in retrospect. Things would just sort of transpire in spite of me and then vanish like smoke rings in the dark. And yet, I lived on somehow. The droning unsilence of this dimly lit prison tomb is struck and broken by the heavy footfalls of expensive foreign shoes, perhaps a priest, but more likely governmental. They draw nearer, and a nervous quiet surrounds their approach as if to read their volume for an answer to the only question in the air: who gets put down? Executions didn't happen fast, because the holy belief was that mental anguish was essential to the transference of punishment from one life to the next. So a period of psychological unraveling was required to petition the great muse to hear their sorrow and judge them by the quality of their misery. Truly, there was something poetic about this icon of sacred inspiration and veneration drinking the torment of those who misused its liquor. And yet, not even gods could extract a satisfying response from me, or any genuine indication at all of guilt for my alleged crimes against creation. But to my surprise, the footsteps stopped at my cell. I supposed at least the gods were willing to get something from me today, even if it was only to be my corpse. I don't believe in God, holy man, or whatever you are. Let's go already, I told him. I'm not a priest, the voice replied. My allegiances are much greater than that. I turned to see him, to match the voice to this arrogance, courtesy more than they deserved. He was a fit, blond man, clearly someone of high esteem and poise. His suit was tailored to fit well, and seemed tailored recently, blue, like lapis lazuli, punctuated at his neck by a black silk tie ornate with unusual designs and glossy black sheen over the matte of its canvas. These details screamed, in a time and place such as this, devoid of color or visual intrigue of any kind, and thus his countenance might as well have been angelic, but for whatever immense wealth his appearance implied, it could not match his gaze. It was a gaze of which I had only seen a handful of times in my life, across endless landscapes of human atrocity. I'd served in the left-hand seat of monstrous berserkers and counted the bodies of the multitudes left in their passage to the southern hemisphere in the last days of the tribulation. I had seen it in his eyes, that profound emptiness, unmoved by any measure of life and death, driven by the basest of innate desires and amplified in the mastery of dark crafts. It'd be foolish to underestimate the devices and design of anyone that can peer into human life so contemptuously, so vacantly. And yet some have, too, described me this way. What is someone like you doing in a place like this? I asked tentatively. Tell me, he said, dismissing two abstract units to the outer hall of the prison and scanning the area near my cell. Why are you in here? Bad luck, I guess. I feigned ignorance to see what he really knew. No, he said, smirking but annoyed. Tell me what you did. I don't have to tell you anything, I said. Of course not. But I think rather it's what you want to tell me. He came back. He takes a seat in front of my cell on an old wooden chair, dusty with age. The shadows seem to bend across his face, obscuring it, save for those eyes, as if the darkness moved as he willed it. Prosaic, yes, but that was how it seemed. So tell me, he said, menacingly. You only get shipped, I started, to Lower Mecca if you're a murderer or a terrorist or an enemy of the state, I explained, suddenly realizing what he was doing. I paused and he waited for me to continue. And they only put you to death if you kill children or for high theocratic treason. And did you? He asked. Killing kids isn't something I do, I told him. And he said, how about betraying your people in collusion with their adversaries? How about that? I only stared as he stared back. He didn't seem to break his gaze or lower his affect to match my slowly emerging irritation to the revelation he was mentally goading me towards. I'm done talking, I tell him, turning away again. You don't have anything I want, so just talk to someone else. He didn't move. He simply stared, challenging my resistance to his mind game. Just let him sit there. See if I care at all. What interests me most about you, he resumed, is that you feign this guilt. You give me this slow response while you swallow hard and search your heart for the remorse we both know has never lived there. Don't think your pretenses impress me, Rodney. You have no loyalties. I don't think you even know the meaning of the word. Whatever, I said, shutting my eyes as I faced the brick wall again. I'll be dead soon enough, dead to the world, dead to psychos like him. I'm here to liberate you, he said, drawing an envelope from his breast pocket as I heard behind me. The folded paper, the light ruffling of expensive fabric, the sounds originating from a place relative to the position I last viewed him in. These were all consistent with an action I half expected, but could fully identify from past moments of my own stalking. Or perhaps I should say, promote you. Barely able to contain my curiosity, for reasons not yet clear to myself, I maintained my position. Are you still here? I asked. Yeah, so that was a bit of chapter 5. Um, and as I said, there are 15 chapters. And greetings to everybody who is here. Um, I think I will read one last excerpt here. Um, let's see. I'm going to go down to chapter 10. And as I said, if you're just joining, I am reading from my book, The Sainthood. I had, again, this a much grander presentation for all of this, but it's been a bit technologically frustrating as I tried to get things ready. Um, but let's see here. Actually, I'll come down to chapter 12, and I will read a bit of this. And like I said, I will give you some context for everything at the end. So here we go. The mirror of the outer realm reflected prophecy to us. The words became that which we believed. Past, present, future, all things in between, here and hereafter. The muse inspires and gives us stride into the palace of ultimate glory and dominion. Theologica Ultima, as it came to be called, emanated with truth in the face of the end times. Dark is the night, long is the path. And on that path, we dashed our feet against the same jagged rocks where faithful men yet dared to walk before us, but where their hubris led their passage to temptations of the self, and their failures became sacrificial trials meant to obliterate the final contradictions and release us our burden of human doubt. Dark is the night, long is the path. And through holy tribulation we meet again in the midnight crossroads of the monumental to stake existence on our movements, lest indecision turn our hearts to stone, sinking us to the depths of abysses unknowable, until that which could at least answer salvation's call can heed the call no longer. Make no mistake, brothers and sisters. Judgment swings as a pendulum, delivering evenly the requisites of causality and the bane of contrition. In our righteous suffering, we are absolute and absolved thereby. We are made complete in the purifying terror that awaits us in that long midnight. Dark is the night, long is the path. an arrow from the quiver of wrath piercing through the firmament and given a name as our undoing, our tabernacle, the zenith. And so tomorrow is substance, the potion of our sacrament, blood mingled with tears and dust of centuries transcending. Give up your sorrow to loyalty in arms, in transformative absolution. Fidelis, the muse beckons the steadfast to exodus across Centurion, the harrower of destinies, made of all our hopes and dreams. Your children, your families, your lovers, your true friends, hold them close enough to kiss or to settle a blade. The melody of our promises and deeds will be challenged and measured by the purity of your song as you ascend in harmony or perish in glory and light forevermore. May you climb the ladder to your star towards life everlasting in the meadows of the muse, for thine is the kingdom. And with that benediction, every human presence resounded in kind. Thine is the kingdom. Families and individuals arose from genuflection to take their leave at the conclusion of the sermon. I suppose, as a protege to the Reverend Keyes, I should be grateful for the luxury of this proximity. But these human games do not interest me. Their passion for wits and wagers against fate and consequence precludes my capacity for comprehension. I do not doubt. But the interests of the Reverend, however trivial they are, serve to support my own aims in their alignment together. He offers embraces and comforting expressions to the elder ones of his court, to which I find no use knowing that their weak flesh could never survive the exodus. The sojourn across Centurion requires elevation of spirit and flesh. None among us here are yet worthy, these pathetic dregs of their kind. It sickens me to occupy the costume of lesser beings, but the Reverend has assured me that he has acclaimed mastery over the technological contrivances of this planet. Still, I question how long I must participate in this gambit for the last utopia. Truly, admirable is the conviction of this human who has guided my hand thus far. But nothing so shallow as the human conception of the muse could compel me to believe, because my own memory of the never-ending has shaped my own unique capacity for faith in the endless sentient shadow which looms over the epochs and always will. The hour is upon us, 6, the Reverend said to me through the fading footsteps of the departing parishioners from this temple for what I knew with certainty to be the last time. So it seems, I replied. I will go to the TV station and deliver this message to the world via broadcast. You deliver it to them in Lower Mecca, he ordered me. I am deconstituting. My spirit rejects this flesh prison, I tell him, looking instructively at my pale skin. He said only, soon it won't be a problem for any of us ever again. I said nothing to this wretched Homo sapien. I only took my leave. All right. Well, I think that will about do it for the reading. I had mentioned that I would announce that I intend to publish the book. The book will go on sale at the end of this month, because the edits, everything necessary is done. Um, and maybe if you follow me elsewhere, you saw that it would be available via Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. You can search for it, searching for Matron Thorn, or just searching for the Sainthood. There's apparently a sort of erotic teen novel by the same name. I didn't write it, but you're more than welcome to pick that up too if you want. Um, but it is there at the end of this month. The process of finding an actual publisher, a mainstream publisher, uh, doesn't really serve the agenda that I had for the creation of the book, which was just that I wanted the story to be told. I had a good story. I had this thing that I wrote it, most of it while I was at work. There were some times in transit between home and work. My commute was about um, nearly an hour um, going and then an hour back. So it's like 2 hours right there. But I was working at a nursing home. And so I put a lot of it together there in the downtime between helping the residents. But the story itself is something I've had sort of on my mind for several years. Anyway, um, there's probably a little bit of time. If anybody has any questions about anything related to this, you can type them in the chat and I'll answer them. But as I said, this will be out at the end of the month. Sometime in the future after that, I'll do a public reading, some likely just somewhere here in Finland. And then maybe sometime next year, I'll publish the second book. It's a trilogy, so there's 3 parts. As far as the context goes, the story moves between the perspective of several different characters, and there are several different storylines. But each chapter is told from the perspective of someone else. This is a bit inspired by The Rules of Attraction by Bret Easton Ellis. I wouldn't say that there's anything subject matter wise or content wise that is at all reminiscent of that, but I thought that Bret Easton Ellis's approach to establishing all of the different characters by sort of telling a part of everyone's story by each character was really interesting. So, for example, you have Sean Bateman, who is the brother of Patrick Bateman, who you probably know who that is. He would describe a situation from his perspective and how he felt. And then another character would describe the same situation and also describe Sean Bateman. But his description would differ from what Sean Bateman said, which both of these factors built on the differing sort of impressions and perspectives that each character had. They helped to shape the personality. Knowing the characters' insights, their feelings on things, not just objectively hearing about them, but in comparison to those of a character you've already become familiar with, it it tells more than you've actually written, and I think that's a really useful plot device, a useful device for character development. So that's kind of how the narrative is structured. That I am telling a linear story from beginning to end, but I'm telling it with different characters, and not everybody is in the same place at the same time. There are flashbacks, and as I had written in the description, I would classify this as being a cyberpunk fantasy epic. Um, what I've written is barely what I've read. Sorry, is barely a few pages of a very long story, and there's not really much that you can tell from what I read, other than sort of how the book reads, how the characterizations unfold, a bit of the motivations. I read from the perspective of three of the main characters. Um, I'd say there's about six or seven. Um, Chapter one begins with I guess we could call him the main protagonist, which is um, a character named Ren Halo. And then there's quite a bit of there's much more to say about him than I really have time to explain, and I would do a really poor job of trying to elaborate on that in just a few sentences. But he is the main protagonist. Um, the second chapter, uh, conversely, is about is told from the perspective of the secondary antagonist, and there's more than one secondary antagonist. Another feature of the story is that in each of the characterizations, I establish, and this is actually kind of uh, a main theme of the sainthood, is that no one is absolutely good or evil or anything like that. The sainthood in itself is kind of an ironic name because everyone is flawed. I liked flawed characters. I like people that you don't fully support, or it makes you feel, sort of strange to support them. It's There are definitely characters whose motivations are more benevolent than others, and there are definitely characters who, you know, give in to their nature and they betray people. But the whole point is that in the future, things have kind of become a monstrously exaggerated form of what they are now. The things that are good, they're good in this way that's very disingenuous, and the things that are bad, they're bad in this way that seems almost sympathetic because the disingenuity of things around people, just things around you, is so overwhelmingly just profound that it's reasonable to be a criminal or be a murderer because you feel something. The first part that I had read sort of establishes that the world is it's very jaded, it's very nihilistic. You have class systems, but again, everything's an exaggeration of what we know now. The class systems then, in this future time, there's a stark division. There's decadent elite people who are not rich even for their productivity or their ability to support any kind of need. They don't do anything. They're just people who are rich from just because they are. They were born into it or they grew into it. And the people who are poor, they're inconsequential. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what their potential is but these rich people are terrible, terrible people, but they surprise you with how compassionate they can be. And these poor people, these low people who are supposed to be humble, surprise you with how selfish they can be. The having never had anything for, just a moment to savor that, that lifestyle of having something, of having affluence and things like that. It's addictive to somebody who's never had anything. Not always, but for some. Others go the other direction, and they realize how meaningless it is, and they don't desire it. It's not a threat to them. So the story spans across time, worlds. There's quite a bit more than it's even possible for me to say, and I don't think I would do a good job of articulating it in words, just in any simple explanation. I think it's best to, if you read it. Um, the music was important. I did want to have that for this because while it isn't one of like my, I guess, more well-known projects, Rust-Colored Glasses, all of the music I wrote based off of this exact story. In the chat, I will go ahead and put the Bandcamp link. And, there's a bit of music there. I listened to a lot of the music as I was writing, and in any case, the future idea was that we would make a few really exclusive shows where we play the music as the book is being read, which we intend to do, but Esoteric Tradition will do that sometime in the future. But yeah, in any case, like I said, the end of February, I'd say if you're interested in buying a copy, check the first week of March. I will probably make another video just sort of to show that it's available. So do subscribe to that, to my channel if you haven't already, but I guess if you're here, you probably do. Again, sorry about the tech problems in the beginning. Have to figure that out because the software I was using is actually really cool. I just there's so much. It's such a learning curve, honestly. But I hope that you enjoyed listening, and I hope you'll give the book a chance. I have other books that I'm working on. I'm actually working on several at the same time, which is a terrible idea. I don't recommend you do that. But The Dark Wander is, it's not related to the trilogy of the Sainthood, but it's a true crime horror. And there's not too much I can say about it right now because I don't want to give too much of it away. But I think as a standalone story, it reaches a bit of the same heights creatively that I was able to get to with making music for projects like Benzo. User Unknown, we're going to have a company meeting tomorrow, Esoteric Tradition, and I'm going to actually tell them a bit about the plans for this year. And one of the plans includes the sequel, or I guess the second episode to User Unknown. One of the actors is currently visiting his home in London, but he'll be back, and then we'll probably look at filming something for that near the end of the summer. There's going to be a couple of things before that, though. Thank you for asking about that. And I don't know, depending on how closely you guys have paid attention, you'll hear that a lot of the well, there's almost like a shared universe to all of these different things, to User Unknown, to the Sainthood, to some of the themes in the Audiobook. You know what? I If there is enough interest in it, I would do it. Um, and if there's time, I I really enjoyed writing it, and um, it would be really cool to curate like a really epic reading of the entire thing. Um, I'd be open to thinking about that. Let's see what happens after February, because maybe that could be a thing. Um, there's a Patreon that thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Um, there's a Patreon that is going to open um, by the end of this month as well, and there's going to be uh, different content, including a radio play, um, Fathoms, which is I've written it, directed it, and it will. I'm going to score it and do the sound design and everything with my dark ambient project, Materia Abyssu, and it'll be Lovecraftian horror. It's a mystery noir kind of a thing. The script for the first episode is pretty much done, and I'm going to meet with everybody in the next week to discuss the plan to have the table read, um, and then get to recording it. Um, and it'll be episodic, but I'm going to put at least an excerpt of the first episode on YouTube, and then everything else after that will go onto the Patreon Echelon Prime. Um, and an audiobook idea for the Sainthood is that's kind of a good idea. I might think about that for the Patreon as well. Um, and we have another thing that's going to come up that I'll talk about real brief, quite briefly, but there is going to be a feature-length film this year, and I can't tell you too much about it yet without giving it away. It's going to be a topic of discussion at the company meeting tomorrow, but we're doing a film about a pop singer, and it's probably the most ambitious of these film projects that I've put together so far. Um, but it will be true crime. It will be horror. It's a documentary about the disappearance of a pop singer, um, and we're really excited to do that. There's even uh, there's so much I want to say, but I have to. I can't give too much of it away right now. Thanks for asking. If I could, I would love to. Okay, well, if I could, I would love to produce like some really high end videos for the sainthood, and at least in the sense that like to turn it into a series. One of my favorite series, cyberpunk series on Netflix, is Altered Carbon, and I think that I would love to adapt the sainthood into something like that. Um, Esoteric tradition is not quite that equipped to do something as elaborate as that, but I'm not ruling it out. One day, when the circumstances are right, you know, I might like to look at doing something like that. Even if I could just, um, I don't know, produce like a very compact, like a segment of it or something. But it would have to do the story justice, and it's all about the characterizations. The character, it's very character driven, and it's you know, in a sense, it's almost more important to represent all of the storylines and the characters and their personalities and the environments and everything. It's more important to represent all of that in like an hour than to try to tell the entire story in 2 hours. Well, yeah, it's hard, but anything is possible if you have the right vision and you know exactly what you want. I think it's again, I wouldn't rule it out. It's ambitious, but it's not impossible. Much harder things have been achieved with much less. And if we look at stuff like Blade Runner, if we look at the retrofuturism and stuff the like David Lynch's Dune and um, Metropolis. I mean, these are all things these are legendary films, but they didn't have even like a fraction of the resources that we have now. Um, User Unknown, we filmed that on a budget of less than 50 euros. Um, but see, it's not really about like it isn't about the production in like a like tech sense. Right? Like the technology wasn't really that important. It was just about telling a story and conveying something, an atmosphere, and that's what you lose yourself in. And if you can lose yourself in the right atmosphere, even the production, the quality of the cameras, everything works for you. Um, it's kind of how like I'm a huge fan of the first 3 or 4 Silent Hill games, and I noticed recently that they've remade the second Silent Hill game. And yeah, it looks really slick and everything, but that's not what made it good. The what made the first few Silent Hill games good was just that it told the story. It was the sound design and it was the narrative, and the characterizations. I liked that the PS2 graphics. I liked that it made you use your imagination a little bit, and then your mind fills in the blanks, and that's what makes it scary. And there's something about antiquated technology that I think that's inherently sinister, is inherently ominous when you have cameras that are not that good, when you have a narrative and a storyline that's wrapped around making a documentary and the found footage is inherently scary because there's this element of the unknown. There's a part of you that decides what is menacing about this. So you touch on those subjects and those themes, and then you can build a strong narrative off of the context of why those things are scary. Um, but it was really satisfying to write that episode of User Unknown. Um, there were a couple more scenes that were planned, but um, the filming took a few days, and the editing took a long time. Um, but really, what took a long time is subtitles. Subtitles always takes a really long time. That's one of the most time-consuming parts. I mean, the creative side and the putting things together, the editing, production side of all that stuff, that doesn't take that long by comparison because I know exactly what I want to do. But the subtitles, there's an art to putting subtitles and things. When the frequency and the instance when the words appear on the screen, all of that stuff is crucial. There's an art to doing it, and um, I think it's something that at least on an artistic level should be taught at schools. Yeah. Well, Esoteric Tradition is my company, but that's not really like a good way to explain it. It's a art gallery. I guess might be a better way to describe it, but it's also kind of a company. It's a platform by which I um, I am branding all of my creations, everything that I work on. And there are other people involved. There are people who are involved in proximity, close proximity, and then there are people who are involved more remotely. Um, as you had mentioned about Femke, she lives in the Netherlands. She's the actress in User Unknown, but she's involved. Um, I'd say she's on kind of the outer tier of the creative higher side of the hierarchy in esoteric tradition, and then there's more closer circles. But we do it's graphic design, visual media, audio, um, sometimes event type stuff, or it's I can't really give it any sort of catchy buzzword kind of description because it fulfills whatever is needed. I've so far worked with Devin Morty, and I've worked with the Czech black metal band Inferno, and obviously my own stuff. Um, but it is, it is a directive side of everything, and a lot of the graphic stuff. But like I said, there's several other people involved on the levels. Yeah. So that's probably going to about do it for me. Um, it's almost 1 a.m. here in Finland. Thank you, everybody, for coming, for asking questions, and for participating. Check my the bio of my YouTube channel for things if you would like to message me privately, or if you want to um, visit esoterictradition.bandcamp.com. That's where all of the music that gets made from all of my projects, the newest stuff, is usually found there. Anyway, all of you have a nice night. I will keep you updated on things. Yes, good night to everybody. And be safe out there in the dark. Thank you so much. Good night.